My name's Daniel. I'm 57 years old, and for the last 30 years, I thought I had everything a man could want: a stable job, a loving wife, a quiet home in the suburbs, and a brother I could trust with my life. My wife, Emily, and I met in college. She was beautiful, not the kind of woman who turns every head, but the kind who makes you feel like you're the only one in the world when she looks at you. We got married young, built a life together, raised two wonderful kids. I worked long hours, but it never felt like a burden, because I was doing it for us, for her. My twin brother, David, and I were inseparable growing up. We shared everything: our room, our clothes, even our friends. He was more outgoing than I was, more charming, and people just naturally gravitated toward him. I was the quiet one, more grounded, I guess. But I never felt jealous of him. He was my brother, my other half. Emily and David got along well. Maybe a little too well sometimes, but I never thought much of it. It's funny, people always joked about how they could never tell us apart. How Emily must mix us up sometimes. She'd laugh, roll her eyes, and say she always knew which one was hers. I believed her. I always believed her. Over the years, there were little things that didn't add up: phone calls she'd take in another room, messages she'd quickly delete, family events where she'd sit next to David instead of me. I brushed it all off. I told myself I was imagining things, that paranoia wasn't love. But deep down, I think I already knew something was off. The truth came out in the most unexpected way. It wasn't through confrontation, or a fight, or even suspicion. It was an accident. A single slip-up that shattered everything I thought I knew about my life. And the craziest part, it happened on our 30th wedding anniversary. That day, Emily planned a small dinner at home, just the three of us. She said David wanted to stop by to celebrate since he couldn't make it to the restaurant the night before. It seemed innocent. We drank wine, laughed, reminisced about old times. For a moment, I felt happy again, like the old days. But when Emily went to the kitchen to get dessert, David's phone buzzed on the table. Normally, I'd never touch another man's phone, especially my brother's. But the message that popped up made my blood run cold. It was from Emily. It said, "I wish I'd just go to bed already. I can't wait to see you later." I remember staring at that message, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. My first thought wasn't anger. It was disbelief. My mind tried to rationalize it. Maybe it wasn't my Emily. Maybe it was someone else with the same name. But then I saw her contact photo. It was her, my wife, my Emily. I didn't move for what felt like an eternity. I just sat there, gripping the edge of the table, trying to process what I'd just seen. My brother was in the bathroom, humming to himself, completely unaware that his whole world, our world, was about to collapse. When Emily came back into the room with dessert, she smiled like nothing was wrong. "Chocolate cake, your favorite," she said. Her voice sounded soft, loving, familiar. But now, every word out of her mouth felt fake, plastic. David came back, sat down, and started talking about something at work. I barely heard him. My eyes darted between the two of them, watching every look, every gesture, every shared glance. And suddenly, everything I'd ignored for years began to make sense. The way they avoided eye contact when I walked into a room. The inside jokes I didn't get. The times David showed up by coincidence when Emily was home alone. I couldn't finish the cake. I said I was tired and went to bed early. But I didn't sleep. I lay there, wide awake, listening to their voices downstairs. They talked quietly, but I caught enough to know what was happening. David said, "Has starting to notice," and Emily replied, "Just keep calm. He trusts us too much." Those words cut deeper than any knife. He trusts us too much. They were right, I did. I had built my whole life around that trust. When I heard David leave, I went to the kitchen and sat there in the dark, staring at the empty wine glasses. I could still smell her perfume in the air. My hands were shaking, but my mind was strangely calm. I knew I couldn't confront her right then, not without proof, not without understanding just how long this had been going on. The next morning, Emily acted like everything was fine. She made breakfast, kissed me on the cheek, and said she was going to run errands. I told her I loved her, and she said it back without hesitation. That might have been the cruelest part. After she left, I decided I couldn't live in the dark anymore. I needed to know everything. How long, how deep, how real it all was. So, I called a private investigator. It felt strange, saying it out loud. "I think my wife is cheating on me with my twin brother." The man on the other end of the line paused for a long time before saying, "I've heard a lot." But that's a first stop. The private investigator's name was Mark Thompson. He had this calm, gravelly voice that made it sound like he'd seen every kind of human mess imaginable. And maybe he had. When I explained the situation, he didn't laugh, didn't judge. He just said, "All right, Tom, let's find out what's really going on." We met that afternoon in his small downtown office. Old furniture, blinds half broken, coffee that tasted like it was brewed last week. But the man knew his job. I handed him a few photos of Emily and David together from family gatherings. "They're twins?" he asked, squinting at the pictures. "No," I said quietly. "We're the twins. I'm the one on the right." He looked at me for a moment, and I could see that small flicker of pity in his eyes. I hated that look. "Give me 2 weeks," he said. "I'll get you answers." Those 2 weeks were the longest of my life. Every little thing Emily did felt suspicious. When she got dressed up to meet a friend, I noticed details I'd never cared about before. The extra time she spent on her hair, the new perfume I didn't recognize. At dinner, she smiled like nothing was wrong. She'd ask about my day, talk about the neighbors, laugh at small things. And I sat there, pretending. The worst part was David. He kept calling, inviting me over to hang out. I couldn't even look at him. Every time his name popped up on my phone, I felt sick. I told him I was busy, working late, not feeling well, any excuse to avoid being near him. Finally, the day came when Mark called. His tone was serious. "Tom, we need to talk. Can you come in?" When I arrived, he had a small folder on his desk. He didn't say much, just opened it and slid the photos toward me. The first picture was of Emily at a hotel. The timestamp said 3:47 p.m. She wasn't alone. David was with her. The second photo showed them holding hands in the parking lot. The third, well, I couldn't even look at it for long. It was enough. More than enough. My entire body went cold. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was humiliation. My own brother. The person who shared my childhood, my memories, my parents. Mark spoke softly. "I'm sorry, Tom. I've seen a lot of affairs, but this is cruel." I didn't respond. I just stared at those photos, feeling like my world had shattered in slow motion. When I got home that night, Emily was there, cooking dinner. She smiled, asked me how my day was. I stood in the doorway, watching her, realizing I didn't even know who she was anymore. I didn't confront her then. Not yet. I wanted to understand why. How long? I needed her to admit it. So I calmly told her I'd planned a small weekend getaway. Just the two of us, to reconnect. She smiled and kissed me. "That sounds perfect," she said. But what she didn't know was that it wasn't going to be a vacation. It was going to be the moment everything came crashing down. That Friday morning. I woke up earlier than usual. The suitcase was already packed, hers and mine. I had reserved a small lakeside cabin, the same one we'd stayed at during our first anniversary. I figured the irony would sting more once the truth was out. Emily came down the stairs in that floral dress I'd always liked. "You look beautiful," I said, and even though my voice didn't shake, my heart did. She smiled and kissed me on the cheek, unaware that I already knew everything. The drive took about 4 hours. She sang along to the radio, laughed at her own jokes, and held my hand every now and then. Every time she did, I felt that mix of love and disgust twist in my stomach. How could she touch me like that after being with my own brother? We reached the cabin around noon. The lake was calm, sunlight bouncing off the surface like little diamonds. It should have been peaceful, romantic, but to me, it felt like the calm before a storm. We unpacked, cooked lunch together, and sat out on the porch. She leaned against my shoulder, whispering, "It feels good to be away from everything, doesn't it?" I wanted to scream right then, to ask her how she could say that after spending her away time with my twin, but I kept it together. I needed to hear it from her. After dinner, when the sun started to sink, I poured us both a drink and sat across from her. "Emily," I said quietly, "can I ask you something?" She smiled, still completely at ease. "Of course. How long have you been lying to me?" The smile faded. She blinked. "What are you talking about?" I didn't answer. I reached into my jacket pocket and slid the photos across the table. Her eyes widened immediately. Her hands trembled as she flipped through them. "Tom, I interrupted, my voice low. "Don't even try. Just tell me why." Tears welled up in her eyes. She covered her mouth, shaking her head. "It was supposed to happen. I swear. It was one mistake." "One mistake?" I said, standing up. "A mistake that lasted months. You cheated on me with my brother, Emily. My brother." She started crying, trying to explain something about loneliness, attention, confusion. I didn't care. Every word felt like poison. Finally, I said, I just needed to hear it from you. Now I can move on. She looked terrified. Tom, please, don't leave me. It didn't mean anything. I turned toward the window, staring out at the lake. It meant everything to me. You took 30 years of trust and crushed it. That night, I slept on the couch while she cried in the bedroom. I didn't comfort her. I didn't say another word. In the morning, I left early. I took the car and drove home alone. She called dozens of times, but I didn't answer once. I wasn't sure what my next step was. Divorce? Confront David? Or maybe just disappear for a while. All I knew was that nothing, absolutely nothing, would ever be the same again. When I got home, the house felt completely different, colder, emptier, like the air itself knew what had happened. I sat in the driveway for almost 10 minutes before I could bring myself to go inside. Everything reminded me of her. The shoes by the door, her mug in the sink, the faint smell of her perfume in the hallway. I threw my keys on the counter and just stood there, staring at our wedding photo on the wall. We were so young back then, her in that simple white dress, me with too much hair and too little sense. I remember how she looked at me that day, like I was the only person in the world. And now, that same woman had looked at my brother the same way. My brother. I picked up my phone and scrolled to David's number. For 30 years, we'd shared everything, birthdays, fishing trips, stupid jokes. He was my twin, my other half. And now he was the person who had destroyed everything I loved. I called him. He didn't pick up. I called again. Straight to voicemail. David, I said after the beep, my voice steady but cold. I know everything. Don't call me. Don't come near me. You're dead to me. Then I hung up. The next few days were a blur. Emily kept texting me, long messages about how sorry she was, how she didn't want to lose me, how she was willing to do anything to fix it. I didn't reply. Not once. Instead, I took a few days off work and just existed. I'd wake up, make coffee, sit on the porch, and watch the sunrise. I didn't even feel angry anymore, just empty, like someone had scooped out everything inside me and left a shell behind. Then, out of nowhere, David showed up at my door. I saw him through the window before he even knocked. He looked awful and shaven, tired, wearing the same jacket I'd given him last Christmas. For a second, I almost felt sorry for him. Then I remembered everything. When I opened the door, he said, Tom, please, just let me explain. There's nothing to explain, I said flatly. You slept with my wife. It wasn't like that, he stammered. We didn't plan it. We were both drunk. It happened once and, don't lie, I snapped. I saw the messages. I saw the photos. Once doesn't turn into months. He froze. His mouth opened like he wanted to argue, but then he just lowered his head. You're right, he said quietly. It was wrong. I don't expect you to forgive me. I won't, I said. He nodded, tears forming in his eyes. I've lost everything because of this. Good, I said, and shut the door in his face. I stood there for a while, my back against the door, breathing heavily. I wasn't proud of how I felt, but for the first time in weeks, I felt something other than pain. Maybe that was the beginning of healing. Or maybe it was just another kind of anger. The morning after David came to my door, I woke up to the sound of silence. No calls, no texts, just quiet. For the first time in a long while, it felt like I could actually breathe. I made a cup of coffee and sat outside on the porch. The sun was still low, the world calm. That peace felt strange, like a foreign emotion I'd forgotten how to hold on to. But as I sat there, staring at the trees, my mind wandered back to Emily. 30 years. 30 years of mornings like this, breakfasts together, shared jokes, arguments that always ended with laughter. Was it all fake? The memories kept looping in my head, her laugh, her hugs, the way she had reached for my hand while we watched TV. I wanted to hate her, but I couldn't fully erase the woman I had loved for most of my life. Later that afternoon, my sister Claire stopped by. She knew something was wrong. Everyone in our small town did, eventually. News like this spreads faster than wildfire. She didn't knock, she just came in and hugged me. I'm so sorry, Tom, she said softly. I didn't say anything at first. I just stood there, stiff as a statue, trying not to break down. She pulled back and looked at me. You don't deserve this. Neither of them are worth your time. I keep trying to tell myself that, I muttered, sitting down at the kitchen table. But it's hard to erase 30 years. Claire sighed and sat across from me. You don't erase them. You accept them as part of your story and move forward. You can't let them define what comes next. I nodded, but I didn't fully understand how to do that yet. Moving forward sounded easy, until you realized you had nowhere to move to. That night, Emily showed up. It was almost dark when I heard the knock on the door. I knew it was her before I even looked. My stomach twisted into knots, but I opened the door anyway. She stood there, eyes red, holding a photo album, our wedding photos. "Tom, please," she whispered. "Just hear me out." I crossed my arms. "You shouldn't be here." "I know," she said, tears spilling down her cheeks. "But I can't sleep. I can't eat. I messed up. I threw everything away for nothing." "Then why did you do it?" I asked. "Why him?" She hesitated, staring at the ground. "Because he reminded me of you. I don't know, it was like chasing the version of you I thought I'd lost." That hit hard. For a moment, I didn't even know what to say. "Finally," I said, "you didn't lose me, Emily. You just stopped seeing me." She cried harder. "Please, Tom. Can we start over?" I shook my head slowly. "No. You broke something that can't be fixed." She stood there for a few seconds, waiting for me to change my mind. But I didn't. Eventually, she turned and walked back to her car, still crying. I closed the door, leaned against it, and let out a long, shaky breath. I didn't feel powerful or satisfied. I just felt empty. But somewhere deep down, I knew this was the first real step toward letting her go. The days after Emily came to my door felt strangely quiet, like the world was holding its breath. I'd expected to feel free, lighter somehow, but instead, I felt this dull ache that wouldn't leave me alone. I went back to work that week. I manage a small hardware store. Nothing fancy, but it's been my place for years. My coworkers didn't say much. They all knew, of course, people always do. But they gave me space, and I appreciated that more than words. I buried myself in work, stocking shelves, fixing displays, helping customers, anything to avoid thinking about her. Every time I had a quiet moment, her face would creep back into my mind. Her laughter, her voice, the way she used to call me Tommy when she wanted to cheer me up. Now those same memories just hurt. One afternoon, an older man named Bill, a regular customer, came in. Has one of those guys who always strikes up conversations about life, whether you want him to or not. He looked at me and said, "You look like a man carrying a heavy load, son." I forced a small smile. "Something like that." Bill nodded, leaning on the counter. "My wife cheated on me once," he said suddenly. 30 years ago, with my best friend. I blinked, caught off guard. "Seriously?" He nodded again, his eyes distant. "Worst pain I ever felt. But it'll tell you something, it stopped hurting the day I realized her betrayal didn't define me. It defined her. That stuck with me." After he left, I sat in the back room for a while, replaying his words in my head. Maybe he was right. Maybe what Emily did said more about her than about me. That night, I cleaned out the house. Every photo, every note, every piece of clothing that reminded me of her. I boxed it all up. I didn't throw it away, I just couldn't. But I needed it out of sight. As I packed, I found an old letter she wrote to me on our 10th anniversary. It said, "You're my home, Tom. No matter what happens, I'll always love you." I sat there staring at that sentence for a long time. Then I folded the letter and placed it in the box with everything else. That chapter was closed. By the end of the night, I felt exhausted, but in a strange way, lighter. Before going to bed, I stood by the window and looked out at the quiet street. I realized that for the first time in months, I wasn't waiting for her to call, or hoping she'd come back. Maybe that's what healing actually looks like, not forgetting, but finally accepting that it's over. The next morning, I woke up to sunlight streaming through the curtains. It was strange, the light looked the same as every other day, but it felt different. Maybe because for the first time in a long while, I hadn't dreamed about her. No shouting, no tears, no replaying that night in my head, just quiet sleep. I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and let the steam rise against my face. The chair across from me was empty, her chair, and instead of breaking me, it finally just felt like an empty chair. Nothing more. After breakfast, I decided to take a drive. I didn't have a destination in mind, I just needed to get out of that house. I ended up at the lake about 30 minutes away. The same lake where Emily and I used to go fishing every summer. I hadn't been back since before everything fell apart. The air smelled like pine and fresh water. There were kids skipping rocks, couples walking hand in hand, and old men with fishing rods. Life was happening, still moving even when mine had stopped for a while. I sat on one of the benches and just watched the ripples move across the surface. After a while, I noticed someone sitting a few seats down, a woman, maybe in her 50s, reading a book. She looked up and smiled politely. I nodded back. She said, "Beautiful day, isn't it?" "Yeah," I replied. "Feels like one of those days where the world's trying to remind you it's not all bad." She laughed softly. We'll drink to that. We ended up talking, nothing deep, just small talk. Her name was Linda. She told me she came here every morning since her husband passed away last year. I still talk to him sometimes, she said, smiling sadly. I know it sounds crazy. It doesn't, I said quietly. Sometimes talking is the only way to make the silence feel less heavy. She nodded, and for a while, we both just sat there, watching the water. When I finally stood up to leave, she said, "It's nice to meet someone who understands quiet." That line stuck with me as I drove home. Maybe she was right. Maybe people like us, the ones who have lost something, learn to appreciate silence in a way others never do. That evening, I sat on the porch again, watching the sunset turn the sky orange and pink. And for once, I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel bitter. I just felt calm. Emily hadn't called in over a week. David hadn't shown up again. My life wasn't back to normal, but maybe it was finally starting to find a new kind of peace. As the light faded, I whispered to myself, "You're gonna be okay, Tom." And for the first time, I actually believed it. A few days later, I found myself back at the lake again, same bench, same quiet air. I didn't plan it, really. I guess it just became a place where my mind could breathe. To my surprise, Linda was there too, reading the same book as before. She looked up and smiled when she saw me. "Well," she said, closing the book slightly, "I was starting to think you were just a what-I'm visitor." I chuckled. Guess I'm becoming a regular. We talked again, this time a little longer, about her late husband, about my marriage. She didn't pry, she just listened. There's something rare about someone who listens not to respond, but to understand. Linda had that gift. I told her how Emily and I had been together for 30 years, how I'd built my whole life around our family, our home, and that trust. I didn't go into the worst details, not yet, but she could tell there was pain behind every word. She said something that stuck with me. "You can't rebuild the same house with broken bricks, Tom. Sometimes, you have to clear the ground first, even if it hurts." I didn't answer right away. I just stared at the lake, letting her words sink in. She was right. For months, I'd been trying to figure out how to fix what was already shattered. Maybe I wasn't supposed to. Maybe I had to start over completely. When I got home that day, I opened a box I hadn't touched since the separation. Old photo albums, letters, mementos, Emily's handwriting on birthday cards, pictures of family trips, Christmas mornings with everyone smiling like the world was perfect. I looked at one photo, Emily and David together at a barbecue, laughing, heads close together. I remember taking that photo myself. Back then, I thought it was just a sweet moment between two people who got along. Now it burned. But then I did something I didn't expect. I didn't rip it up. One didn't throw it away. I just put it back in the box, closed the lid, and whispered, "That's your past, Tom. Leave it there." That night, I called my daughter, Maggie. We hadn't spoken much since everything happened. She had been trying to stay neutral. But when she heard my voice, she sounded relieved. "Dad," she said softly, "I'm glad you called. Mom told me a little about what happened, but I know it's not the full story." "I'm not calling to talk about her," I said. "Just wanted to hear your voice." We talked for nearly an hour. About her job, her kids, life in general. It felt normal, safe. Like maybe not everything in my world had fallen apart. After we hung up, I realized something important. Healing doesn't come all at once. It comes in moments. In quiet lakes. In kind strangers. In phone calls that remind you you're still loved. And for the first time since my world broke, I didn't go to bed angry or lonely. I went to bed grateful. A few months have passed since that phone call with Maggie. It's strange how time can heal things you once thought were impossible to recover from. The pain doesn't disappear, it just softens around the edges. Becomes something you learn to carry rather than something that crushes you. I'm still in the same town, though I moved to a smaller place near the edge of the woods. It's quiet here, peaceful. Sometimes, I wake up and listen to the birds outside and realize I haven't thought about Emily or David in days. And when I do, it's not with anger anymore. It's more like distant curiosity. Like remembering an old dream that doesn't quite hurt, but doesn't matter either. Linda and I still see each other from time to time. Not romantically, at least, not yet. We go for coffee, talk about books, about life. She has this calmness about her, a way of making even silence feel comfortable. I think that's what I needed most, peace, not excitement. As for Emily, she called once, said she wanted to talk. I met her at a cafe downtown, mostly because I needed closure. Not because I wanted her back. She looked different, tired, maybe even regretful. For the first few minutes, we didn't speak. Then she said quietly, I ruined everything, didn't I? I took a deep breath and told her the truth. You did. But I'm not here to punish you, Emily. I'm here to let it go. She nodded, eyes watering, and whispered, I'm sorry. I believed her. But forgiveness doesn't mean things go back to how they were. Sometimes, forgiveness is just the final door you close before walking out of the house for good. That night, I drove to the lake again, the same spot where I first met Linda. The sunset painted the water gold, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel broken. I felt free. I realized something then. We spend so much of our lives defining ourselves by who we love, who we lose, or who betrays us. But when all that noise fades, we're still here, still breathing, still capable of rebuilding. I may have lost a wife, a brother, and a version of myself that believed love was unbreakable. But I gained something deeper, self-respect, clarity, and peace. As the light faded, I whispered to myself, you did it, Tom. You made it through. And I sat there until the stars came out, alone, yes, but finally okay with that.